Welcome to the Magnificast lock-in. Your parents have dropped you off once again. Who knows what they're about to get up to with a house all to themselves, but you don't want to think about that. You're here to think about you're here to think
Yeah,
about these great
don't do
games.
that.
These great games. You're here to think about your foosball strategy. You can put the rest of that out of your mind for now. You can think about it when you're going to bed. Matt, sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought. I haven't even introduced myself. I'm Dean, the one you already know. Your youth pastor, the youth pastor who makes these kind of inappropriate jokes in the middle of a sermon.
Oh,
And I'm
nice.
itching to get to the next phase of the walk-in, so I'll let you introduce yourself, even though I've already spoiled it.
Yeah, no, and I'm Matt Bernico. I'm the other co-host of this podcast, and I'm also the senior pastor looking on disapprovingly to see what the youth are getting up to.
That's right.
Sexual jokes in my church? I don't think so.
Yeah, this youth fest is on thin ice. All right, so last time around, Matt had two Reddits that he gave to me because I couldn't find any, and I was nervous about that. I felt bad. I felt like I had failed both Matt and the walk-in community, but I redeemed myself because this week, Matt didn't find any, and I did find two, so the balance has been restored.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and throw this first one to you. I'm pretty proud of both of these. The second one's better, but the first one's pretty good. The title goes like this. Am I being unchristlike when I haggle for a good deal, when someone punches in the wrong price for me, etc.? And the details go like this. I'm a price shopper by nature. Like 90% of the shopping I do is based off the deals I get. Like going to flea markets, garage sales, I haggle the prices with the vendors. If I go to the store, I work to get multiple coupons stacking. Talking with people over the phone for shopping, yep, I spend hours milking every deal possible. Oh, they mislabeled the price tag on this item from $100 to $1? I'll buy it. Coupons to make things free? Totally grabbing a handful of them. So part of me enjoys doing so, but part of me always wonders if I should be feeling guilty or sinful, as in some cases I feel I'm literally stealing from them. At the same time, part of me doesn't, since I realize stuff is marked up super high to start. So mixed thoughts. Curious what you think.
Okay, I've got some thoughts. So this makes a lot of sense. So sorry, the question was, is this Christian to do this, right? Is this
Yeah,
permissible?
is this person being unchristlike specifically?
Nope, this is Christ-like. I gotta say, it is Christ-like for sure. So we can go at this from a few different directions. First of all, could you see Jesus extreme couponing? I don't know if that's. I don't. I mean, I guess I could imagine that. I wouldn't like to imagine it, but I could. So
Right.
there's that.
Yep.
The other way about it, though, is maybe the more virtue ethics approach to the situation, which I'm apparently very big on right now. Okay, so think about it this way. First of all, there's the story of the shrewd businessman, right? The
Right.
shrewd businessman in the parable. He's all about he's making deals. He's screwing over the big boss,
Mm-hmm.
and he's making those deals so in the future somebody else can be kind to him. And I think that if you're going to take these great deals that you bought, maybe you bought 100 Glade plugins for 2 cents a piece, or you got 30 gallons of chocolate milk and they had to pay you to take these things off your hands. I think as long as you're going to give those to other people, I think you're good. That's Christ-like. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing I was thinking about too is that in the Magnificat, it does say that that God's here to bring down the mighty from their thrones, and what better way to do that than couponing the shit out of these guys, right? Like you make the safe way pay you to take the baloney, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how you
Mm-hmm.
do it. That's how you send the rich away empty. You make them you make them pay you for the Tide
Mm-hmm.
Pods, and that's great. I think that's Christ-like.
Yeah, that's great. I think that you've really worked your hermeneutical muscles on this one.
Yeah.
Um, there are some really great replies in here. One person says, "Taking advantage of other people's mistakes. Does this sound like holiness to you?" And the original poster says, "No, but it doesn't sound like sin to me either." And I like that. I like that gray area.
Yeah, I like kind of like working around it like that, but also the problem that poster is having, the commenter there, is that this is not taking away of somebody's weakness. This is taking advantage of a corporation's weakness. And who gives a shit?
Yeah,
They're
absolutely,
not people,
100%. That's right. Well, in the eyes of the law,
but in the eyes of God.
yeah, they're just garbage.
They're just
Garbage waiting to
garbage.
be burned up with the rest of the planet.
The moths will come eat all of the bologna right off the shelves.
That's right. All right, let me move you to question 2. The title of this one is Magic 8 Ball, Toy or Ouija in Disguise?
Holy shit.
And the question goes
This
like
can't be
this.
what it's about. No.
Yep, this is what it's about. The question says, my son found a Magic 8 Ball at a garage sale and I wouldn't let him have it. My parents would never let me have one as a kid because they said the Bible says no one can know the future and should not ask to know the future. So I ended up getting in a fight with my wife about it. So what do you think? Is it harmless for an 8-year-old?
I love this.
There's a
I
lot
love
of
this so
layers here.
much. Right, there's a lot of layers. Man, I um that's amazing. I love the application of Ouija logic to
Yep.
the 8 ball. Oh, it's so cool for so many reasons. Okay, so this person doesn't want to buy their 8-year-old the magic 8 ball because it says that no one can know the future.
Mm-hmm. And
And
shouldn't ask
on,
it.
on this one, okay, yeah. In this one though, I'm gonna have to side with this parent, with his dad. I think. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna side with his parent, and here's why. The Bible does say that you can't know the future, and I think it's really important that we teach our children that no toys can tell you the future. So that's why I'm coming here to Christian Shark Tank today to pitch a new toy for you and everyone listening, and it's called the Christian 8 ball. It's
Yeah.
not magic. I've excluded the word magic from the name for
Yeah.
obvious
Yeah.
reasons. And when you shake it, it just says outlook unclear every single time. Every
That's
single
great.
time it tells you the same thing, outlook unclear. And that way your kids are like, "Oh wow, an 8 ball. I love this. Thank you parent for getting me this thing right here." But they're never sinning. They're not doing magic and no one knows the future. And I think I'd like to sell this idea. I'd like to get you in on the ground floor of this idea, if I could.
Yeah, I'd like to invest. I'm a little curious about your margins already, but let me, I've been in this business for a while and I want to just throw back a little product development. What if instead of saying future unclear, it actually just gives you a different proverb every time? So that way it's not like you
Um,
know the future, but it's kind of toying with it a little bit because it's like good
mhm.
advice for the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's good. I can take that. I can take that feedback and kind of bring it. Run it up the flagpole and see what the fellas upstairs say. I don't know. And my margins they're low. I mean, I'm just buying Magic 8 balls by the truckload from garage sales, and I'm just opening those babies up and putting the new little thing in there, and it's cheap. They're cheap. I mean, no Christians are buying them at the garage sales anyways. So I'll just come through and I'll swoop them all up and just get them in my Christian 8 ball uh production line.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in for 20% equity and 1% royalty on every future Christian 8 ball.
Okay.
There's one there are a few, lots and lots of, as you can imagine, there are 40 comments on this one in particular. Most people say what's wrong with you, and at the end of it, the original poster does concede the point and says, thanks for all the input. My mind has changed and my wife knows that she was right, so all is well with the world.
Oh, so did they buy their kid an 8 ball? I hope so.
That I'm not sure about, but they did realize they were wrong.
Mhm.
So
I Man, that is such a great example of the maladies of the evangelical mind. Just how that all shakes out into extreme paranoia that you're gonna accidentally buy your kid a satanic toy. I love it.
there are some wild comments in here, I have to say. This is one that I'm not exactly sure what to make of it, but I will read it to you. This comment, which does have a lot of downvotes, says, FYI, as someone who's waded through hell on earth, never let a Ouija board into your home unless you want to understand the true meaning of fear. Pretty much everything else is safe. Most tarot cards are even safe. They're not the real deal. Palm reading is a joke, just a parlor trick. Those boards, though, that's where things get terrifying.
Oh, I love it. People are so afraid of Ouija boards.
I've never used one, and I probably never will.
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't use a Ouija board, and you should buy my Christian Luigi board
That's
instead,
right.
and it's
That's
just
right.
pictures of Luigi on there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Saint Luigi, that is.
That's right. That's the one. All right. Well, we've done these, and they were fun. But now let's talk about what's happening in the world,
We got to do
dude.
it.
Oh wait, how about I go first since you did all these
Yeah,
Reddits?
that's great.
Okay, cool. Well, oh man, so many things are happening in the world. Things don't stop happening. There were more police shootings. There's more protests. There's all kinds of things going on. And who boy, that's what I gotta say. COVID's getting worse? I don't know. It's just it's all bad. But today is June 17th. And I woke up this morning, I looked at my phone, and the first thing I saw on my phone was a video of a police officer. Well, it's actually not clear if she's a police officer. I've heard mixed reports since that maybe she was like a hired sort of like private security person. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. A, a cop, nonetheless. Any way you split it, a cop talking into her phone and becoming very upset about her trip to McDonald's, where she ordered an egg McMuffin, she ordered a coffee, she ordered a hash brown, and then she went through the drive-through and like didn't get it, didn't she got the coffee and then didn't get the food, and then she just kind of proceeds to melt down about this. And if you're an alien and don't understand the cultural context of the moment, uh you might be like, wow, that's a really weird story. And you're right, it is a really weird story, but this is kind of coming off the context of this other weird story that happened a few days ago, where some police were reporting that they think they were poisoned when they got milkshakes at Shake Shack. That they think that somebody put bleach in their milkshakes, and instead, it's been revealed later on that actually they just were sick and nobody poisoned them. um, and okay, anyways, this is all kind of getting to the point that I read this very good article about the kind of developing story about cops who are very afraid to eat food right now. Um, uh, by Sarah Jones. It's called "Cops in the Culture War." Sarah Jones, always my fave. And yeah, it came out today on the 17th, the same day as this police McDonald's meltdown video. And okay. It's a good article for a lot of reasons, mostly because it kind of plays into that good journalistic niche that the Magnificast thrives off of the connection between like conservative Christianity and like fascist police thought. But anyways, I'm gonna read the introduction and then I'm gonna read the outro or the the outro, the conclusion, as some people call it,
The outro.
and we
Yeah.
can kind of talk about like what's going on here because it's pretty fascinating, I think. And Sarah Jones puts it together in just the right way. Okay, so this is what she says. Nobody put bleach into the milkshakes at Shake Shack. The cops who ordered them and got diarrhea had food poisoning or lactose intolerance or indigestion aroused by the consumption of garbage. But for a while, police unions insisted that something more nefarious than gluttony had occurred. The cops were, quote, intentionally poisoned, the Detective Endowments Association tweeted, by one or more workers. The Police Benevolent Association of New York later claimed that the mystery substance was bleach. But anyways, it turned out later that it was not the case. That didn't happen. They just had the poops. Um, Cool. And then she goes on to kind of sum up that story I just mentioned. A new viral video appears to show a police officer in Georgia weeping over a delayed McMuffin order, and quotes from the police officer. Right now, I'm too nervous to take a meal from McDonald's because I just can't see it being made, she said. And that's what's going on. So Sarah Jones is painting the picture that there is a quote culture war with the police right now. And I think that the culture war with the police is much more a fabrication of the police than it is like a real culture war. It is the case though there is a real um, a class war with the police at the moment as
Mhm.
they're like brutalizing people in the streets. That's a whole situation that is extremely real. But I don't think police officers probably need to worry about getting poisoned at McDonald's. It's a really like a situation where they're punching down so hard on people who
Mhm.
are already like, in a pretty bad situation work wise. But Anyways, so Sarah Jones kind of draws this whole situation out and explains this like as a persecution fantasy that police have. And she says this outlandish persecution fantasies are a staple of the right wing culture war narrative. Much like the Christian right, the cops see enemies everywhere and their imaginations tell horrible tales. In both cases, the lie serves a specific function. It's a screen meant to hide the way power really works. I think this is a really important part because, I mean, this is something we've said in the Magnificast before. This is something that, like Tad DeLay talks about in his book, Against. But like, this is just a good example that kind of brings to light these persecution fantasies and the way that framing like an invisible enemy uh, heightens the sort of tension of the moment and like, I guess, definitely provides an important pretense for violence in the future and oppression in the future. And she says a lot more about the Christian right and kind of drives that home a bit more. But the ending of the article is cool. And she says this: there's a difference between the lies of Shake Shack Squad and the Christian right's more sophisticated attempts at propaganda. Like like Tinky Winky, she says, being gay and the sort of the cultural war that went over that weird moment about about Teletubbies. Okay. Anyways, these days, she says, the Christian right prefers insinuation and spin to outright fabrication. They take a real event like the Supreme Court's ruling that to legalize same-sex marriage and build a fantastical world around it. The police see things that do not exist at all. That's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
But the two groups are still very alike, and neither is wrong to think they have enemies. While no one wants to put pastors in jail, and police abolition is still a minority view, the left does threaten the hegemony of the right. What they call persecution is progress for others. The police and the Christian right fear a world that will not keep them in power. Um, so I think that comparing these two ways of thinking, like the like cop thought and conservative Christian thought, are pretty interesting juxtapositions because they both do this, right? Um, they both need to yeah, I mean, they both express persecution narratives to firm up their power or as a pretense to build up a stronger system of oppression or something or use more outlandish rhetoric to alienate people or double
Mhm.
down on their types of oppression through rhetoric, whatever. But, anyways, I like this piece just because it does make this kind of connection, uh, that there's like a underlying thread between these 2 ways of thinking, right? That fascist thought is fascist thought in one place or another, and, they present themselves in different ways symptomatically, but there's kind of like a root to them, and, I don't know, it seems helpful for, diagnosing some of, like, what's going on at the moment and how all of it sort of works.
Yeah, I really appreciate that link as well, especially because the persecution complex is so strong. I think what's particularly troubling about it in police is that it's that persecution complex and the perception that everybody in the world is against you that ends up licensing literal murder. Whereas, I mean, it does that in a systemic way with evangelical Christians, but like I always think about Darren Wilson in his defense in the grand jury trial said that Mike Brown was like a demon. You know, he concocted this like incredibly uh, elaborate explanation of how threatening Mike Brown was, even though he was a teenager, and that
Right.
was the rationale that Darren Wilson used to justify killing him. And I think that is probably the most horrifying piece of it because it's like the persecution complex is annoying and stupid, and it's ridiculous to like watch a an officer complain about not getting her food from McDonald's fast enough or something. But the fact that there's kind of a direct line from that feeling, that really goofy incident, to people literally killing people, I think is pretty troubling. And again, just goes back to Tad DeLay's book, like you mentioned, when he describes evangelicalism as a kind of death cult. I think there's something similar there that resonates with how police just sort of view the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. Um, man, what's that and that Twitter video is just shared by people. I mean, like, I don't know if there's some kind of deeper, sneaky social media stuff going on. Some people have suggested that there might be, because the woman is not, in fact, um, the woman police officer is not, in fact, like a police officer in the precinct that she was reporting in, like
Huh.
that she was somebody else hired on. Anyways, I don't know if there's anything sneaky going on, but other than if there's not, right, this is just somebody sharing it on Twitter and it kind of blowing up because of like the outlandishness of the story. But all that to say, like, these types of stories feed into that persecution narrative, and like, yeah, just like you said, there's real consequences for doing that, for making police feel paranoid. People who already need nearly no excuse to brutalize other people, if
Mhm.
they feel like they are, if they feel like they are under attack by like, the invisible Antifa super soldiers or whatever, and now they're gonna poison their McDonald's. Like it's gonna make them react that much more violently.
Yeah.
Um, and it's bad.
Yeah, it makes me think too. I mean, I tweeted about this earlier, but I'll admit it's hard for me to have a lot of empathy for the police. But when I watched that video, the one bit of empathy that I did feel was um, how unfortunate that this is a person who basically lives a life where they have to feel like completely afraid of everybody around them, manufactured or not.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
it's a really terrible way to live. Um, and Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed has this great kind of explanation of how when the oppressor is oppressing, they dehumanize themselves, and when the oppressed liberate themselves, they also liberate the oppressor, which is an act of love toward the oppressor because they remove the oppressor from that position that is so destructive to everybody, including themselves. And I guess I need to think a bit more about that, like how to sort of revolutionize or operationalize a kind of empathy for how bad this job is also for the people who do it. I don't know, maybe that's not the best strategic take, I'm not really sure, but anyway, it just kind of was like an impression that hit me as I saw that video
yeah,
today.
yeah. I mean, I think it's something to think about, though, right? Like, if this story is legitimate and organic and true, like at its base level, and I imagine we'll find out sooner or later if it is. But if it is all true and it is happening just like it is, right? Then this is not like someone's, people. This woman is not just like saying these things because she, wants to psych herself up or something, or
Hmm.
she's not thinking this way on purpose, right? This is a pathology that underlines this type of like fascistic sort of um worldview, I guess, and it is something to feel sorry for. I don't know, like
Yeah,
you don't want someone to be in this. Uh, if we're going to be good Marxists, right, the material conditions sort of do set this person up to act this way. So if we could significantly shift them, it would be better.
yeah,
It's definitely like a bad mental health situation for her to be in, for anyone to be in. So um, it's another outlook for abolition to maybe get people out of these types of extremely bad situations.
yeah. The best way to live a police officer is abolish their job, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Um, well, let me take you to an article that I really enjoyed reading this week, which was at the National Catholic Reporter, not to be confused with the National Catholic Register.
Hmm.
A really hard thing to keep straight in your brain. The National Catholic Reporter is the good one, the Register is the bad one. In the Reporter, there was a great article by Shanine D. Williams, who has done just a ton of incredible work in the last several years on Black Catholicism and Black Catholics, and trying to say that Catholic history involves, Black Catholic history, and Black history involves Catholic history, etc. Just a really incredible researcher and writer, and she writes a lot of op-eds and articles, and she wrote a really good one this week called "The Church Must Make Reparation for Its Role in Slavery and Segregation." And she makes a really, really good case for reparations, but specifically trying to think through what the role is in, like, for Christians, thinking through their own complicity in the creation of slavery and the afterlives of
Mm,
slavery, etc. And I think it's just really like a kind of reflection that you don't see happening in a lot of Christian spaces or media outlets. So I'll read just a few passages from it that I'm thinking about a lot. So she says, in one part, that it has taken so long for the institutional church and many non-Black Catholics to embrace the rally cry of Black Lives Matter cannot be ignored. It must be said, too, that the recent Catholic statements on racism and rising protests fall way short when it comes to acknowledging the Church's role in the contemporary crisis and direct complicity in the sins of anti Black racism, slavery, and segregation in the modern era. She goes on to, point out some of those things, how Catholicism in particular has been so complicit in, owning, selling slaves, etc., perpetuating segregation. But she does outline a plan, she says, of action for Catholic reparation. And I'll just kind of list the things that she says here, which I think are interesting to think about. So she lists part of that plan would be making formal apologies for the church's own histories of slavery and segregation, stopping the closing of active African American parishes, reinvesting in and expanding the Black Catholic educational system, requiring the teaching of Black and Brown Catholic history in every Catholic school and seminary, endowing scholarships, fellowships, and professorships for Black and Brown scholars at Catholic colleges and universities, and broadening formal church leadership to include anti racist women and members of the laity. And then she says she called upon Catholics to take leading roles in campaigns working to protect Black lives, eliminate racism in the healthcare system, end mass incarceration and bail, and secure police reform and accountability. We
Mm.
certainly might want to say more and more about that, but I think it's just a really lovely article in that it outlines so many things so clearly. And it's, I think, an important thing to start asking questions or continue asking questions or amplifying them, however you want to put it, about what Black Lives Matter means within Christian communities. We talk a lot about how Christians do show up in these protests, and that's really great. But what are the kind of really big and challenging structural changes that have to happen in order to make meaningful reparations on the part of Christians themselves? I think that's like a really fascinating question to be posing to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Um, the list of demands might be imperfect. We might, add things to it or something, but still, or resituate some of the assumptions that even the demands make. But you just the same, right? I appreciate the very concrete demands that you would make in that kind of situation. It is extremely easy, and Christians are very good at it. Good at the act of calling for radical justice while not wanting it, or
Hmm.
not actually articulating like what that radical justice means. So to affix some real demands to what this actually means is such a, I think, important and powerful step. Christians
Yeah.
should be they should be, asking for things specifically, and I appreciate when they do.
Yeah. There's a great moment in here too. I mean, great insofar as it's a really fascinating observation where she says, while I do not yet foresee a mass Black exodus from the United States, assisting in efforts to reconnect Black people to the land of their ancestors and growth in Africa is essential. And that's something she says can be achieved through Catholic Africa exchange programs. She says, moreover, if there ever came a time when Black Americans did need to flee for their safety, the church could play a leading role. And she goes on to say the denial of the dignity and sanctity of Black life is part of the DNA of this country. It's also a foundational sin of the American Catholic Church. And she ends saying the goal for Black people has never been charity. It is full justice, human rights, freedom, and the complete dismantling of white supremacy, beginning with the church. I think that, like, what I really appreciate about the article is not only those concrete demands, but the kind of like encouragement to think about the church as an institution that could actually play a role in the liberation of Black people. And the way to do that would be by actually doing, in some ways, what it does well, which is building infrastructure,
Mhm.
rethinking its own institutional mechanics, and using those kinds of things in order to promote Black liberation. I think that's like a question or a sort of set of issues that sometimes gets lost in conversations, especially conversations that are critical or negating. But the idea of trying to like rebuild infrastructure or totally transform infrastructure, those are questions that you can affix like dollar amounts and people's names to and institutional
Mhm.
addresses to, and that is an important way to situate demands.
Yeah, definitely. And the that comment you just made about like a mass exodus of Black people from the United States is really interesting too.
Hmm.
This is like kind of an aside to the to that piece, but there's an article that I read earlier this week. It was in Al Jazeera, I think. Okay, It's called "If Black Americans Were to Seek Asylum, They Could Qualify" by Molly Tower. It's this really
Hmm.
interesting piece, though, that's like basically making the case that, like, she's not advocating for Black people to like leave the United States, but assuming that they wanted to, they could qualify for political asylum based on an argument about what the UN has found in the United States with regards to
Hmm.
police violence. Anyway, sorry, that's all just an aside, but it just made me think about that as like
Hmm.
a weird part of like the story, I guess. I don't know,
Yeah.
a weird take on I guess it's strange because it's just hard to think about leaving the United States as a political refugee, but I guess it does make complete sense in this whole big moment. Sorry, that distracts from the entire conversation we were just having about about demands. But I can't stop my brain from working in this dumb way.
No, but I
Um,
think it's a good connection to make, and it's one that she makes herself, right? That uh, given the seriousness of white supremacy in the U.S., it's not inconceivable that Black people would feel the need to leave the U.S. And that idea that she has of like, well, what if Catholics were able to build links with Catholic regions of Africa or something, and that might be some kind of tangible, trustworthy pathway for people to get out. I mean,
mhm.
it's like it's important to recognize these aren't completely fantastical musings or speculations or proposals. Like, she's
Yeah,
thinking about a real problem as strongly as she can, and also trying to think of like a real tangible possibility to prepare for that, which is troubling, but it's an important exercise to think about in a serious way.
yeah, definitely. I guess I felt that same way about the Al Jazeera article too. That
Right.
just like what an interesting, I mean, my privilege shields me from so much of this, I guess, in my own life experience shields me from understanding how, I guess, real this could be, but what like a wild thing to think about.
Right. Well, your parents are back. What they've done all night, you'll never know. But you can spend all day thinking about it in the haze that you will now be entering the world through of sleep deprivation. And as the Mountain Dew finally courses its way through your bladder and into the toilet, that's the price you pay for being at a lock-in. Just a swirling brain full of new ethical questions. You've probably given your life to Christ for the 67th time, and congratulations on that. I'm sure this will be the one that sticks. And if it's not, don't worry. We'll be here next week to do it all over again.
I don't wanna get up for church in the morning, souls alive. Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation. Never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between us and our Lord. Jackson, keep your hoods up. Keep your hoods up.